If you want to play jazz, one really important style to know how to play is Bossa Nova. Bossa Nova can be thought of when Brazilian music and jazz meet together, and Bossa Nova tunes make up a lot of different jazz standards that you need to know for jam sessions and playing with others. So in this video, we'll talk about important rhythmic and comping patterns you need to know, important chord voicings, as well as important chord progressions. Let's learn some Bossa Nova. So as mentioned, Bossa Nova is a unique music style that blends jazz harmony and traditional Brazilian rhythms. It emerged in Brazil in the late 1950s and early 1960s. The words Bossa Nova mean new wave or new style. And this music was revolutionary in Brazilian culture, but of course, many tunes that we call jazz standards today are Bossa Novas, such as The Girl from Ipanema, Corcovado, Black Orpheus, and many others. So let's start by talking about a very important part of playing Bossa Nova, which is the rhythmic patterns. Not only are rhythmic patterns important to feeling the music if you're improvising like a horn player, but they're also important, of course, if you're comping like a piano player or a guitar player. Let's take a look here at rhythm number 1. So let's start by clapping the rhythm here. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And now let's play it along with a chord. Let's just do D minor, 1 chord here. Okay, now let's do a chord progression like a 2, 5, 1. So that's the first rhythmic pattern to be aware of. Let's go to rhythmic pattern number 2 and let's clap it first. It sounds like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, now just with 1 chord. Let's do it with a chord progression now. All right, now let's go to rhythmic pattern number 3, and this one is a little bit harder to feel because there's a little bit more syncopation going on than the other ones. So we'll count it out loud and clap it at the same time. All right, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 1, 2, 3, and. All right, and now with a single chord. So 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 1, 2, 3, and. Now with the chord progression. Okay, so taking a look at these right here, these are 3 Bossa Nova rhythmic patterns for comping and for feeling this music. Now, important to stress that these are just basic comping patterns, and if you go and you listen to the great guitar players and piano players that play Bossa Nova, you're gonna hear lots of variation and flexibility. They're not gonna be playing them so sterile like I just did. They're gonna be playing them with a lot of different context and fluidity, right? So these are to help you get started and then listen to the music to understand how to express it the best way. All right, so let's talk about some important Bossa Nova chords. Chord voicings that if you're a guitar player or a piano player, you should be aware of as far as comping through this music, but also if you play a horn or otherwise, just kind of understanding what some of these voicings are that are being used can help you make some decisions in your improvisation as well. So the first one is the 6-9 chord, right? The major 6-9 chord. So this is a C6-9. This is a voicing, of course, I'm playing on a guitar, but you can also see a basic piano voicing as well. Now, the important thing about this chord is it has the root, it has the third, and instead of the fifth, it has the sixth in there, and then it has the extension, the ninth on it. And so the ninth is An extension, of course, that jazz musicians use all the time. If they see a C major 7, for example, well, they might play a C major 9 chord instead. But being aware of that, of course, especially for bossa nova, is important. So that's a 6-9 chord. Here's another voicing of a 6-9. This is a G 6-9 voicing, so it sounds like this. Drop 2 there. Now going on to minor voicings. The minor 9 chord is one that is commonly played. So here's a C minor 9. Okay, again, that 9, that's the really important note there that you're going to hear a lot in bossa nova. Here's another voicing. This is a G minor 9. And then let's go to dominant 7th chords. Now, dominant 7ths, you're going to find, you know, the variation of, instead of the minor 9, the dominant 9 is going to be a very common one. But you're also going to see a lot of use of this C7 or the dominant 7 sharp 11 chords, right? So here's a C7 sharp 11. And it sounds like this. Okay. That top note there is the sharp 11, the F sharp. Here's another voicing. This is a G7 sharp 11. For the guitar players, this is a drop 2 voicing here. So while these are not exclusively the only chords that are used in bossa nova, they're definitely ones that are very characteristic. So along with all of the other things that you know about playing jazz chords, add these into the thought process when thinking about playing bossa nova. Now let's go over 3 very common bossa nova songs and look at the chord progressions within them to try to understand a little bit more about what common harmony happens in bossa nova tunes. This first one is called Black Orpheus. This is a tune by Luis Bonfa. Really beautiful, enchanting song. Sounds like this. So let's take a look at the first 8 bars here. We start with an A minor, and that's our 1 chord, our minor 1 chord. We're in the key of A minor here. So we have an A minor that goes to a 2, 5, 1. Okay, B minor 7 flat 5 to E7 flat 9 to A minor. Now, this isn't really non-characteristic of other jazz harmony here, but you're going to see a lot of minor 2-5-1s in bossa novas, like here in Black Orpheus, so definitely good to be aware of that. Then we continue on, we get back to that 1 chord here in bar 3, and we move on and play that 2-5-1 again. Then we move on and we go 2-5-1 in C major, so that's D minor 7, G7, and then C major, right? And so the best way to think of this is a 2-5-1 in C major, and then we do a dominant 6 turnaround. Okay, so C major and A minor are what we call relative keys. So C major is the relative major to A minor. So this whole idea of switching between relative keys in bossa novas happens quite a bit, as well as other jazz standards, so important to be aware of that. So let's move on to the next 8 bars of Black Orpheus. It sounds like this. Then it goes back to the top again. Right? So let's take a look at this. So we have this D minor 7 here to a G7, then our 1 chord C major 7 to F major 7. That's our 4 chord in the key of C major, right? So just staying in the key center of C major, then transitioning back to the parent minor here. That's the 2 chord, B minor 7 flat 5 to E7, back to 1, then it turns around back up to the top A section. Okay, so that's Black Orpheus, really common harmony, not only in other jazz standards, but certainly in bossa nova tunes. All right, let's take a look here at the next song. This one is called Corcovado, and this is by Antonio Carlos Jobim, and Jobim being one of the most important bossa nova Brazilian composers that you need to be aware of. Lots of tunes written by him. This one is particularly interesting and has a lot of elements here that you'll see in a lot of other bossa nova tunes. So it sounds like this. haunting melody there. So let's take a look what's going on here in the first 8 bars. So we start with an A minor 6, right? We can call this the 1 chord here for a second, right? So we're in the key of A minor, and that 6th voicing is really particular to Bossa Nova, and not only Bossa Nova, other jazz tunes, but really that sound is very common. So A minor 6 sticks there for a while. Then we have this A flat diminished 7th, right? Just repeats that melody line there, right? Just over a different chord. Sounds really pretty. And then it arrives at the G minor 7. Okay, so this is a really important harmonic concept. Yes, it happens in other jazz standards, but definitely in Bossa Nova. That's what's called a passing diminished chord. A passing diminished chord is simply a diminished chord that is placed chromatically in between 2 quote-unquote diatonic chords, or chords within a key center. In this case, we have A minor 6, and then going a half step below, we're adding that A flat diminished chord, arriving to that G minor 7 chord, right? Now, looking at the next part here, F major 7, we have a 2, G minor 7, to a 5 in F major, right? Now we're in the key of F major, but we have another kind of diminished chord here, right? Which essentially creates this tension as if we're going to a 5-1 sound, but instead we're doing an F diminished chord, right? So the same root as the 1 chord, but it almost creates this tension and resolution sound when we go to the F major 7 there. So that's another use of diminished chords in Bossa Nova harmony and jazz harmony. So let's take a listen to the next 8 bars here. Back to the A minor 6 at the top of the form. Really pretty right here. So now we have a really interesting chord progression going on here. I'll draw your attention to what's in blue here, because I think that's a more helpful way to think about it. So thinking about it in the key of C, we have a minor 4 chord, right? All right, so we're doing what's called modal modulation here. We're actually borrowing from the minor key here, the parallel minor, which would be C minor. So we have a 4 chord to a dominant 7th chord here, a flat 7th chord. Now, this is also called a backdoor 2-5, okay? A backdoor 2-5. So you could think of this as a 2-5, like F minor 7 to B flat 7 is like a 2-5 to E flat major. But instead of going there, you think about it actually resolving to C major, right? That's a backdoor 2-5, and that B flat 7 is what's called the backdoor dominant. It's a substitution for the 5 chord, creates another type of tension and resolution. Now, in this particular case, we're not resolving to the C major, we're actually continuing a chromatic cycle of force here. So we have an F minor 7, B flat 7, then we go to an E minor 7, which is the 3 in C major, and then A7, which is the 6th, right? But you could also think these as chromatically moving 2-5s, right? As if for the E minor 7 and the A7 is a 2-5-1 and D major 7, right? You could think of it that way as well. Then we have this D7 here. This is the 2 chord in C major, but it's a dominant 7th chord. And normally the 2 chord is a minor 7th chord, right? But it's a dominant 7th chord. Now what we call this is we call this a secondary dominant, which means that we are tonicizing another chord in the key center. In this case, we're actually tonicizing G7, all right? And so when we think of this word tonicizing, right, we're really thinking of what is the 5 of this chord. So what's the 5 of G7, right? What's the 5 of G? It's D7, right? D7, the 5 always being a dominant 7th chord. That can be a bit of a confusing subject if you're not really familiar with jazz harmony, but if this is the first time you've ever heard it today, that's great. Now you're aware of it and you can continue to understand it as you study jazz. So this happens quite often, that dominant 2 chord, which actually goes to its proper minor 2 chord, and back to the 1 again. So really interesting harmony here in Corcovado, and very characteristic harmony of bossa novas. All right, now let's take a look at probably the most popular bossa nova song of all time, which is The Girl from Ipanema. This is another one by Jobim. You really just have to know this one, whether you hate it or whether you love it or you've played it one too many times. It's just one of those bossa nova tunes that you just absolutely have to know. So taking a look at the first 8 bars, it sounds like this. So, Girl from Ipanema, we start here with an F major 7. We're in the key of F major here, so that's our 1 chord. Then we go to a G7 chord. Now, it's actually a G7 sharp 11 chord, right? It has that sharp 11 sound, which goes back to why we talked about that voicing, right? Right, the melody is so simple, it's really just repeating itself, essentially. Then we go to a G minor. And I should also mention here, this G7, right? We talked about that a second ago. That's a secondary dominant, right? The dominant 2 chord. It's targeting the 5 chord, which is essentially a C7. So then we go to the G minor. That's the actual diatonically correct 2 chord, right? The minor chord. And then it goes to a G7. Again, the G flat 7 rather. It's also a sharp 11 chord. Then F major 7. Now, this concept right here, the G flat 7 here, it's the flat 2, and it's called a tritone substitution. So tritone substitution of all the styles of jazz is baked in a lot of times into compositions, versus in a lot of other jazz standards, a jazz musician might impose it upon the song, you know, alter the chord change of the song. In bossa novas, tritone subs are often just built in, composed into the song. What a tritone substitution is simply substituting 1 chord for another chord a tritone interval away, okay? So in this particular case, the chord that should actually be here is C7, right? That would be a 2, 5, 1 chord progression in F major. But tritone substitution says, let's substitute that C7 a tritone interval away. So a tritone interval away from C is this G flat, okay? So then we turn it into a dominant 7th chord, because most time a tritone substitution, it's a dominant 7th chord. And so now we have a G7 sharp 11. So we have this cool, not only bass chromatic moving thing going on in the chord progression, we also have this tritone, which kind of creates this sound of an altered 5 chord of sorts going into the 1. So it creates more tension and resolution, but also the 3rds and the 7ths of the C7 are the 7th and the 3rd of G flat 7. So that's a lot of music theory. You don't have to understand all of that. Just important to know that tritones are definitely in lots of bossa novas. Now, the bridge from The Girl from Ipanema is the most complex to really understand and wrap your head around. And I wouldn't actually say that it's really common chord progressions that are happening in lots of other bossa novas, but it's worth looking into. There's multiple different ways to analyze these chords. We're gonna look at it from one particular perspective here. We go into this section that goes F major 7. It goes to a B7. Then it goes F sharp minor 7. To a D7, okay? So what's happening here? So that F sharp major 7 can be thought of as we're in the key of C sharp, and it's the 4 chord, going to a flat 7, right? And again, the whole concept here is sort of this backdoor dominant thing, right? The B7 here being a backdoor dominant, right? That results into the key of C sharp major, right? We don't actually end up going into C sharp major, which is what makes analyzing this a little confusing, but this is one way to look at it. Then we go to F sharp minor 7, which could be thought of as the 2 chord in E, right? And And then we go to a D7, which again would be a backdoor dominant to E major, right? Right, but we don't go to the E major, right? That's the confusing part. Then continuing on to the next 8 bars, we go up to another key, the key of F major, or you can at least think about it this way. We go to G minor 7 here. To the E flat 7. Again, this is the 2 chord in F major, but this E flat 7 is a backdoor dominant that would resolve to F major. Again, it does not resolve to F major. But then we get some more diatonically true harmony here in the last 4 bars of the bridge. It's a 3, 6, 2, 5, 1 chord progression. So it sounds like this. Okay, so we have the 3, A minor 7 to a D7, and in the melody actually is the sharp 11 chord we've been talking about, then a 2, and then in the melody is the sharp 11 over that C7 5 chord. So that's The Girl from Ipanema. Now, I'll also mention that we've studied all 3 of these songs in our Learn Jazz Standards Inner Circle. We learn 1 new jazz standard every single month. It's a great way to improve your jazz playing over the long term. So if that's something that sounds interesting to you, I'll leave a link in the description or have that up on the screen right now. Now, another great Bossa Nova song that you might want to practice is called Blue Bossa. This one's by Kenny Dorham, really common song to learn. So on the screen right now, I have a video how to play Blue Bossa. It goes over a full tutorial on that song, and we'll continue our conversation here about Bossa Novas. If you like this video, make sure you give it a thumbs up, make sure you subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you in the next video. Cheers.